myself the status of victim. If I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the survivors or of those who died under torture or after being tortured, I believe that that the way I would proceed in order to calm my endless suffering, what I would do would be to feel even, to be able to see that in suffering that is inflicted today upon the accused, that I can say that I am even with this. I'm asking myself questions on the possibility of a kind of relief for the victims. Today, insofar that I don't know if it's possible, I cannot imagine, but if it's possible, I would have the feeling, well, that the relief would be in the way that I could feel that I have got even. That I would see that in the suffering of the person who would have tortured my father or killed my children, well, to see that this suffering can be tantamount to what he's feeling now. Thank you, Mr. Bizet. My colleague will continue.
First, Mr. President, Your Honors, I have two questions. One, I would like to go back a little bit to the event that you testified before the co-investigating judges concerning your testimony. You said that when you first were arrested, you were kept in a house and interrogated, and then you told the investigating judges that later on there was a mock execution. So would you please clarify this event if you still recollect that fact, and who was behind that plan to stage such mock execution?
François Bizot. Unfortunately, I don't know. I can't give you a very clear answer. I'm not even sure it was a mock execution. All I know is that I was led amongst armed soldiers, that my body was put this way and then put this other way. I heard the triggers, I heard the guns being armed, and the shot, as expected, that was expected, did not happen. And eventually, I was firmly picked up by hands that put me in a different position and then took me. I was still blindfolded. They took me along a path, whereas before, I believe, we were in a paddy field. So was this an execution that did not actually materialize? Was it a mock execution to make me panic, make me feel frightened? I don't know.
Thank you. My second and last question. regarding the interrogation method, you said you said that all detainees at M13, while being interrogated, they were inflicted tortures, but it is an exceptional case regarding you yourself. And during the interrogation, you said that there was a close relationship between you and the accused. And you also mentioned that the accused told you his background and that you said that it was the way that the accused would use to make sure you could share some information about you. And I would like to ask you, how do you feel about such a relationship?
François Bizot. I'm very sorry, I don't really understand your question. It may be a translation issue. I don't understand the reasoning, what you're trying to drive at.
I may repeat the question. You said detainees at M13 while they were being interrogated, torture were applied, but it was not in your case because you were interrogated by Duch and you were not tortured. And during that time of interrogation, the close relationship was built between you and Duch. And you said Duch even told you in detail Duch's background. And you said that this is the way that Duch would like you to also share this information the same way as he shared with you. My question is that what is in your view, what do you think about such a method of questioning by Duch?
François Bizot. Well, what I think of this is that he probably tried to secure answers to the kind of questions that he wanted to ask so that he could put together a file concerning me. And whilst other prisoners were tortured, but I don't know this, I can only suspect this, imagine this, in order to secure confessions. But the method that was used with me was a different one. And what I feel on the basis of this is, well, I don't feel anything, basically. I'm rather happy that in the end it was the conclusion of this was that I was not a CIA agent.
Much thank you, and that's all. The President. Next, I would like to give the floor to lawyers group 4. Would you like to ask questions to the witness? Mr. Hong Kim Soon, thank you, Mr. President, and your honors, and other people in and around the courtroom. I am Hong Kim Soon. I have Mr. Chair Olivier Sure in our group 4. I have some questions to put to Mr. Francois Bizot. If you do not understand my question, kindly ask me to repeat. In 1971 to until now, it has been more than 30 years since you were arrested. So your memory, as you told the judges that sometimes the memory has been recorded in your notebook. And I would like you to also tell us, besides Duch, who was the chairman of M13, and that you was detained at M13, do you still remember who hold or held the parallel positions as Duch at that time, and what were they?
Non, j'ai pas compris.
François Bizot, I did not understand.
Est-ce qu'il est possible de répéter juste la fin?
Could you repeat just the end of your question?
Mr. Kamsoon, at M13 you said there was Mr. Duch who was the chairman of M13. It was when you were detained for 3 months in 1971. Besides him, who were the other people in position that you still remember who held parallel positions as Duch? So who were they?
François Bizot. The only person whom I remember and who had a higher duty was the deputy or the assistant to Duch. He was older than the accused. I have no recollection of his name, his pseudonym or whatever. I knew it at the time, but I've forgotten that name. And I recall that that man certainly was very frightening to me. And I don't see that the accused had any other deputy, so to speak, at least in the 3-month period that I spent in M13.
Mr. Kamsoon, thank you. My next question. Recently you said beside Duch there was his deputy who was frightening to you. So what do you mean by being frightening to you?
C'était un homme brutal.
François Bizot. He was a brutal person. He was a cynical man. And I wasn't the only person who was afraid of that man. I think if he'd been in charge of that camp, I would no longer be here. I would no longer be alive. And fortunately, I was not under his orders, but the very first hours I spent in the camp under his control and in his presence were hours of, let's say, initiation for me that were extremely hard. For this reason, I was extremely frightened at the idea of having to be under his control for the duration of my detention, and I was not the only detainee in the camp to feel like this. The guards themselves were ambivalent regarding him and talked little about him, and whenever they talked about him, were very careful. He was not, I can't say that that anybody was loved in that camp. He was not loved or liked, but it was well known that he was an aggressive person.
Mr. Kamsun, thank you very much. I would like to follow another question with this. On the 22nd of January 2008, you gave an interview to the co-investigating judge, Mr. Marcel Lemond, and Mr. Yu Bun Leng, concerning the character you can refer to the document D40. In that question, you said regarding the character of Duch, he is a frightening person, but it is a kind of confusing or not. And in the same document, you said the true authority of Duch, he had a full authority and unlimited power on the detainees. And in your book, The Gate, you said that he is the man who means business, so and cruel. So could you please elaborate this, whether he is a cruel person like that?
François Bizot. I may have said that Duch was cruel. I don't recall the context in which I may have said that. If I am now to refer to myself and to my testimony here now, I would not say now that I have been a witness of any cruelty on his part. Inferentially, by inference, knowing that he has killed prisoners, this means that he must have been cruel. But I don't remember when I may have said that he was cruel. He was frightening. That's another thing. I don't see how else he could be perceived. A person in charge of a camp where prisoners are taken in, interrogated, beaten, executed, can hardly of other people. Thank you.
Mr. Kamsun, may I ask you again, in 1971 when Khmer Rouge arrested you, did you speak Khmer clearly at that time?
François Bizot. Yes, I spoke no other language during the whole period of my detention.
Mr. Hong Kamsun, thank you very much. You told the judges yesterday that during your detention at M13, It sounds like you enjoyed more freedom than the other, and you did not even regard yourself as a victim or detainee. Maybe I did not get the full translation or else. And you said you were the researcher working for the Angkor conservation, and then you translated a book which contains about 30 pages after you were released by the Khmer Rouge. So you translated that document for the French embassy. Do you remember, maybe I get lost in the translation, whether the policy written in that document sent to you, were they related to any particular matters?
François Bizot. I came away from M13 and rode, well, first I went on foot, first in an old Peugeot, then on foot, then I took a bus. I had a long beard, and I got to Paconte and got back to my home and my family, where I was reunited with my family. There were moments of intense happiness that were disturbed by the presence of these documents in my possession. My sole concern at that point, having been released, was, first of all, the fact that my two companions were there, over there, and I had left, leaving them behind. And that's a fact that remains with me. It is still a burden on my heart to this day. And second, the presence of these documents, which could possibly be put to use to make me leave Cambodia by the governmental forces if they were to find out about the existence of these documents. I did not want to leave Cambodia. I wanted to stay in the country with my family and to continue doing my work. So those documents were, for me, something that I tried to get rid of very quickly. I handed them over very quickly to the French embassy. The French embassy asked me to translate these. I had no great faith in the official translators of the embassy that they might report to higher government officials the fact that this document existed and that I had brought them back. So I translated them myself because I did not want anybody else to be involved. This document was absolutely full of new words, neologisms, that I had the greatest trouble understanding myself. Anyway, what come what may, I handed over a translation to the embassy, and I'm extremely sorry these texts have disappeared. And it seems to me that very possibly these documents were not sent to France, but possibly the embassy, as I said yesterday, asked the first secretary or the second secretary at the time to summarize my translation, to produce a summary, and that it's only that summary that was forwarded to France. The summary, and I secured a copy of this summary at the archives, and yesterday, Your Honor told me that this was in keeping. Mr. François Bizot's microphone has gone dead. that this was under the reference number E2714, I believe. So this document, I have read this document. It's extremely
Donc,
So I resume. So I felt terribly uncomfortable about the presence of these documents that I didn't want to keep with me physically on my person, and I didn't want to keep them anywhere in my house. So I tried to get rid of these documents as quickly as possible. I was asked to do the translation. I had a lot of trouble doing this translation. I did it with the utmost caution. And finally, it's only a summary of this document that was sent to France. The actual document and my translation are not at the archive of the French Foreign Ministry. As to the summary that I have been apprised of, I have found this summary extremely uninteresting, contains very little of any substance. So that's what I have to say about this. I have no very clear recollection of the content of that text, other than, as I said yesterday, I dare not use any specific words now because these words come from more recent layers of my awareness than the older layers of experience right at that time. But definitely that was all about the system, the ideological system and the political system that was being set up by the Khmer Rouge. So I do not want to take the floor to speak specifically as to the content of that document because too much time has gone by. There is nevertheless the summary that you can consult.
Mr. Kamsoon, I may move back a little bit to M13 again. You said when you were interviewed by the co-investigating judges, you talked about Duch. Maybe you knew him at that time, or maybe you learned of his name or him later. Did you meet Duch at M13?
François Bizot. No, I did not meet Duch at M13. However, I have come across him in a village on the road to M13 in a house where I was detained, chained up for 1 or 2 hours. That was a very brief halt on the way to M13, and there was an old villager there who was there with me, and he spoke to me freely, and he told me that the Khmer person in charge, whom I had just seen and who just stepped out of the house when I was now chained to the central pillar, was Duch. So that name stayed in my memory, and thereafter, later, I don't remember exactly when, I don't think Duch ever namely mentioned Duch, or perhaps he did. I can't say that I remember. That's it.
President, the chamber would like to adjourn for 20 minutes break. So we will resume at 11:05, and Mr. Hong Kam-soon, if you would wish to ask further questions, then you may do so after we resume the session. And we would like to ask the court officer to take the witness to the waiting room and bring him back at 11:05 to finish his testimony this morning.
Please stand up.